I'm Jenni Carlson.
I'm Berry Tramel. Welcome to the Jenni and Berry Show. The college football coaching carousel remains in overdrive, and its effects are massive, even to the schools like OU and OSU, which have not lost their coaches. Alabama has lost Nick Saban. What does that mean for the Sooners in the SEC? Arizona, which seemed to be an emerging force as it enters the Big 12 in 2024, lost Jedd Fisch to Washington after the Huskies lost Kalen DeBoer to Bama. And who knows what will happen with Jim Harbaugh. The carousel is out of control.
Before we talk about that, we want to say a word of thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Berry Show. The Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association, MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, Two Fellas Movers, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, 988, Oklahoma's Mental Health Lifeline. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. And let's face it, if you're moving, a box of pizza and a case of beer just don't work like they used to. Nobody wants to help you. But we know two fellas that love moving. At Two Fellas Moving Company, we offer free, no-strings quotes for your move. With more than 20 years experience, we've pretty much moved it all. Our services don't end up moving either. Need to do some remodeling or spring cleaning? We have you covered with dumpster rentals and junk haul services. Remember, quotes are absolutely free and there are no strings attached. If you're moving in Oklahoma, make sure to call the fellas. Visit twofellas.com for your free quote today. All right, Barry, you mentioned it earlier. Nick Saban retirement from Bama a couple days after the national championship started the domino effects. We knew it would. But let's talk about the first domino that fell. That's Kalen DeBoer, the Washington coach who led the Huskies to the national championship game. He's going to Bama. Is he a fit in Tuscaloosa?
Well, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Kalen DeBoer fits anywhere because he appears to be such a big winner. You know, a lot of coaches, he came from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the city, and the college division. The NAIA school is where he played and coached Sioux Falls, but he became head coach at Sioux Falls, won big, sort of a Lance Leopold type, winning at the lower levels and then winning when he gets to the bigger levels. Goes to Fresno State, does a nice job as head coach, gets whisked away by Washington, takes the Huskies to the national title game. Everyone talks about his coaching acumen. That will fit at Alabama. But the geography is a question. This is a guy that's never coached or been employed by any school south of Carbondale, Illinois. He was at Southern Illinois. Now, the south of Illinois is a little bit of Southern culture, but it's not Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And this is a different kind of place in the SEC, as we do know and will even increasingly know in the years to come. So we'll have to see. Bryan Harsin is the sort of the test case. He went from Boise State to Auburn. It was a total disaster. Now, Alabama is not Auburn. You've got better resources, better tradition, saner people. It's a better deal at Alabama, but still, that culture fit I wonder about.
Yeah, saner people, but really only if you win a lot. And I agree. I do think DeBoer's coaching probably portends well to his success, that I think he has a chance to be successful at Alabama. But the thing about Alabama is it's not just what happens on the field. It's about managing the boosters, managing all the people that think they have a say, and frankly, some of them who do have a say in what happens with Alabama football. It's a lot more off-field than, frankly, probably most Division I, even Power 5 jobs in the country. There's a lot of Power 5 jobs in the country that don't have to deal with what Alabama's football coach has to deal with, because to me, it's as much about the management of those egos as it is anything. That's why, frankly, Barry, I thought Steve Sarkisian was a good option for Alabama. Now, I didn't know if they had a chance to lure him away from Texas. Obviously, another major brand, blue blood, all the things that are true about Bama are true about Texas. It's just that Bama's had more recent success, and obviously a lot of it under Nick Saban. But I thought he had a chance. Dabo Swinney had a chance. I mean, those are the types of jobs that you have to manage, not only the expectations, not only the winning and the competition, but the voices, the egos. I thought those were the guys that Bama might be drawing from. And who knows, maybe they did talk to him. But to me, Berry, that's the thing that so few other coaches have dealt with. And that includes Kalen DeBoer. How does he handle that? To me, that's got to be one of the biggest challenges of Alabama.
Yeah, and he comes in at an interesting time, right? With the sport is changing with the transfer portal, NIL. The talent level is flattening out. Some people don't want to admit it. Some people don't want to acknowledge it, but it's the truth. We've been seeing it. We saw it this year. Michigan and Washington playing for the national title. Alabama has been outstanding for a long time and has still been dominant here in the last 3 or 4 years, but not Alabama dominant. Even this year, when they had a tremendous year, could have lost several games, but rally, make the national semifinals. The talent level is getting closer. Alabama's edge is not what it once was. It's going to be harder than ever to win games. Part of that is the Sooners and the Longhorns going to the SEC. Yeah. Do Alabama fans understand that? Do Alabama donors understand that? I think Alabama administrators understand it, but will they take that into consideration for Kalen DeBoer? So we don't know. But you're right. There are challenges at Alabama. There are challenges everywhere in this new age. So I think Kalen DeBoer is pretty equipped to handle that. He appears to be a guy that knows his way around the portal. Michael Penix Jr. was a fabulous quarterback, came from Indiana. The guy that we know the best, Jabbar Muhammad, cornerback, he brought him in from OSU. We know Muhammad is an outstanding player. So he's been able to mines the portal for talent. So he'll have to do that at Alabama too. It's no longer just a turnkey operation.
Yeah, I know people will probably remember this just like I do, but when the transfer portal kicked into high gear, I think a lot of people, and myself included, we didn't know how it was going to play out, but it seemed like, this just opens the door to a place like Alabama, Michigan, to really gather talent, to just make great teams even greater. And instead, we've seen it flatten out, especially at the quarterback position. That we've seen there's just an abundance of quality quarterbacks in the portal for teams to go out and get, and it can change the entire trajectory, as we saw with Penix in Washington, can change the entire trajectory of the team. So what you said is right. It is flattening out instead of really, sort of bringing all the riches into one place. They're now more spread out around college football. And so that makes me think that how Kalen DeBoer handles the off-field stuff will become increasingly important at Alabama, because they may win a lot. They may play for a national championship again in the next year or two, but they may not, because it's getting more difficult. So how he manages the personalities, how he is with the big money, all the people that are, moving and shaking behind the scenes in Tuscaloosa, I think that becomes even more important. And I don't know, maybe he'll be great at that. Maybe he is great at that. But Berry, Washington is not the same as Alabama. I mean, they've I'm sure got boosters that want to talk to the head football coach, but ultimately, their budget, the money that they're working with at Washington is so much different than it is at Alabama. The media they're dealing with, so much different than at Alabama. So can he handle it? Possibly, but I don't really know that there's a track record to lean on there and how he will handle it. So to me, is he a fit? In some ways, yes, but I think a lot of this really, really remains to be seen.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's just different place, different part of the country, different tradition, different culture, different everything, really. I do know this. I've been spouting off for a few days saying I don't even know if Kalen DeBoer has ever been to the state of Alabama. Well, turns out when he was an assistant coach at Fresno State, I think it was in 2017, the Bulldogs played at Tuscaloosa. So he has walked inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. So he's ahead of the game in some level.
Yeah. Hey, as we talk about fit, another question mark is Jedd Fisch, the Arizona coach who you and I saw up close at the Alamo Bowl. His Wildcats beating the Sooners down there during bowl season. He's leaving Arizona for Washington. To me, Berry, this seems like a more natural fit. Obviously, Washington getting ready to leave for the Big Ten, but has been a Pac-12 school, Arizona Pac-12 school. Not maybe apples to apples in terms of success over the decades, but I think Jedd Fisch is a much better fit, at least from the outset, moving to Washington than maybe DeBoer is heading to Alabama.
Yeah, now only in American football or college football could a guy going from Tucson to Seattle be considered, hey, he's staying in his comfort zone. I mean, it's a million miles away. It's a completely different part of the country. It's completely everything, except they happen to be in the same football conference. And so you think, well, I actually don't know. I'm disbarred from commenting on Jedd Fisch's coaching acumen. When Arizona hired him 3 years ago, I ranked him as a very poor coaching hire. And, of course, then he's completely turned it around for the Wildcats. So don't ask me. He's proven me wrong already. I will say this. We're mildly interested in what happens with Washington and Jedd Fisch, but we got too much on our plate to care, right? I mean, we got to start taking notice of all these new SEC teams, all these new Big 12 teams. Besides OU and OSU, we got to monitor 30 schools, and Washington's not one of them. So I think he'll do fine. However, if you look at what he's leaving, it's a mortal blow to Arizona. Oh my goodness, what a wound for the Wildcats. This is one of the nation's worst or at least traditions. I mean, Arizona football has just struggled and struggled and struggled, and had, occasionally have a good team, occasionally have a breakout year over the decades, but nothing sustained. And here Jedd Fisch has a wonderful season, 10-3, number 11, lots of people coming back, quarterbacks coming back, headed to a new conference. Everybody's excited. ESPN comes out with its way too early top 25. Arizona, the number one Big 12 team for 2024, according to that list. Wow. And then here in mid-January, Jedd Fisch takes off for Washington. It's in the portal era. He's taken a lot of his assistant coaches. He could be taking a lot of players. I'm worried. I'm worried for Arizona. Probably good news for Mike Gundy and the Cowboys. Potentially one less heavyweight to deal with in the conference, but I feel for Arizona.
Yeah. I think that is the ripple that will be felt most here is just what does this mean for Arizona moving forward? And you're right. I was really impressed not only with their team at the Alamo Bowl, but with just how many young guys they had. I mean, obviously, everybody uses the portal. Arizona was no different, but a lot of the guys that were making the plays and doing the heavy lifting for Arizona were high school guys. And obviously that's a Jedd Fisch production. So going out and getting those guys and bringing them along, I was just really impressed by that. They weren't, they still had room to improve. There's a reason they were in the Alamo Bowl. weren't world beaters yet. But considering what they had been, I was really impressed by what I saw on the field, just by where they were going. And, it sounds like as we talk here on Tuesday, that Arizona might be zeroing in on San Jose State's coach, Brennan, I believe is his name. We'll see.
Colt Brennan's distant cousin, Jacko, the old Hawaii quarterback. That's what I learned today.
I had no idea.
Cousins. Yeah.
I had no idea. Wow. That's a connection I would not have expected, but maybe that works. Maybe there's a natural progression and maybe he's able to keep some things together. We'll see. But Arizona, it's going to be interesting to see who does leave, coaches and players, as Jedd Fisch moves and what that means for the Big 12. But Barry, there's one other thing about this Washington coaching move that is potentially impactful to the Big 12. That's the news that Kansas coach Lance Leopold, you mentioned him earlier, he said no to Washington. He decided he's going to stay in Lawrence with the Jayhawks. Was that a bit of a surprise to you? It was a little bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah, it surprises me in one way, and that is financially. I don't know what Kansas is paying Lance Leopold. A lot of money. Not as much as they're paying Bill Self, but still a lot of money. Washington's paying a bunch too. Probably could pay more than Kansas with the Big Ten riches eventually coming their way. Lance Leopold's a coach who is now around 60. He's a guy that didn't hit a major conference until, 3 years ago. So he's in his late 50s before he hit his bonanza. It's hard to make up that money If you want one more big payday, you might need to make a jump to Washington. On the other hand, now this may be, a cold-hearted, jaded soul like yourself may not realize this anymore, but there are some people still walking around who are loyal. And Lance Leopold is a guy that toiled in obscurity. Wisconsin Whitewater forever, dominating Division III. University of Buffalo in the MAC. And all of a sudden, Kansas offers him a job. And he's in the Big 12 now. It's a terrible job. Jayhawks couldn't win to save their life. But they did pay him a good amount of money. Started making real money, and he repaid that with success. KU had a wonderful year this season. Looks like they're going to be a very good team next year. And Lance Leopold stayed with the Jayhawks. Maybe he's just thankful. Maybe he's just saying, hey, this place gave me a chance. We're doing well. I don't need to move on. So I hope that's the case. And I think it's really cool for Kansas if that is so. That's another place that's thrilled that Arizona lost Jedd Fisch, because Kansas has designs on the Big 12 title. How about that? How about Kansas in the college football playoff next December? That'd be something. So, to me, it's a great thing for the Big 12, a great thing for Kansas.
Yeah.
But Lance Leopold has stayed a Jayhawk.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on with facilities in Lawrence. I don't know if anybody's seen the pictures out there on social media. They're doing some major renovations. There's so much gone from the stadium at Kansas that you almost, I'm sure that they've got a plan to have a playable stadium by the time the season rolls around, but there's so much gone. It's almost a little, like, even as an outsider, I'm looking at it thinking, are they going to get this done in time for the season? So lots of stuff, lots of positive momentum that, frankly, could have been squelched the same way that it looks like Arizona's positive momentum could take a hit with Fisch's departure. If Leopold takes that job, who does he take with him? What players go with him? What players look elsewhere? I mean, there's just all the questions of this era of college football and what it could look like, especially now. I mean, Barry, obviously these guys, these players on teams when the coach leaves, they deserve that chance to look around. But what options that leaves their school to then get back in the portal at a time when the portal at large has closed? It's now just players that can leave if their coach leaves. So just a lot of moving parts that can be really hard for a program to deal with at this juncture. So Kansas is definitely looking entirely different moving forward than they would have if Leopold would have said yes to Washington. The inverse of what they're looking at out in Arizona, and obviously we don't yet know exactly what that's going to look like at Arizona, but is it possible that Fisch moving helps OSU more than, say, Saban retirement helped OU, as they are now going to be looking at different conferences, different alignments? How do those two equate for the OSU and the OU fans out there?
Well, I think it's good news for both, but I do have to say, I think there is more reason for celebration in the streets in Norman. It is Nick Saban. Let's remember that. Nick Saban no longer is coaching Alabama. None of us have really let that news sink into our psyche. But Nick Saban is not coaching at Alabama. And, the youngest among us won't remember that Alabama is a fabulous football school, always has been. But Alabama had its share of troubles before Nick Saban.
Absolutely.
Between 1980 and 2007, when Nick Saban was hired, quarter of a century, Alabama was not the dominant force in the SEC. Lots of times it was not the dominant force in the state of Alabama.
That's right.
Alabama really was just very similar to Auburn, very similar at times to Tennessee, LSU, Georgia. Florida, probably the dominant school in the SEC in that time period we're talking about. And Nick Saban changed everything. He changed the success rate. He changed the expectations. He changed the brand of Alabama, which is very difficult to upgrade the brand of Alabama, but he did it.
Yep.
So I don't know that we appreciate yet how much Alabama is going to miss Nick Saban. And, maybe I'm sure that Arizona was going to be a very good team next year. But the idea that Arizona would be a sustained Big 12 power, maybe not. The idea that Alabama was going to win big as long as Nick Saban was there, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's obviously the equation and the math of all of this changes with the expansion of the playoff. With, the Big 12 will have a champion that's going to go to the playoff regardless. We know that. So the chance to get into that playoff field, is now open to all teams in the Big 12, all teams in the SEC. Obviously, we know what the SEC looks like. Very top heavy. You tend to know going into the season, Georgia, Bama, they're going to be at the top fighting for that spot. Everybody else has got to fight them. Now with Texas and OU there, Texas looking great. OU definitely improving under Brent Venables. But the Big 12 being wide open for the last couple of years, even with OU and Texas, I think that makes everybody sit up and take notice when you've got a program in the Big 12 that looks like it's going to struggle. I think that it doesn't necessarily mean that Arizona won't be in the mix, because we didn't think TCU would be in the mix, 2 years ago, and they played for a national championship, for crying out loud. So anything is possible in the Big 12. But the more you sort of have people sort of taken down a notch in the Big 12, the more it opens a door for a team like Oklahoma State, which is returning so much of its roster from this last year, not a ton of upheaval. So they look to be in a good position. And I think that position improved. I'm with you, Barry. I'm not so sure, does Arizona, are they going to be good for a long time at Jedd Fisch stay? I don't know. I mean, 1 year of success is obviously, and they've been building to this point. So the success has been impressive to see them build, but sustaining it's another question. Now Oklahoma State, at least in the short term, looks like the door has widened a bit for them to have a better chance to play again for a Big 12 title, win a Big 12 title, and maybe make that playoff field next year as it expands to 12. All right, Barry, before we get out of here, one more coaching move, potentially Jim Harbaugh talking to NFL teams. We know he's interviewed with at least the Chargers. So if Jim Harbaugh leaves, which a lot of people have talked about, we've talked about the likelihood that he's going to the NFL. If he goes, are we talking about a lot more dominoes, or is this maybe one of those in-house hires? What happens if Harbaugh leaves Michigan in terms of the head coaching dominoes?
Well, it sounds like the Wolverines will turn to Sherrone Moore, the OU grad who filled in for Jim Harbaugh during his suspensions in 2023. Offensive line coach, offensive coordinator. And if so, that stops the carousel. All you have to do is promote an assistant, and it really slows the carousel. When a Lincoln Riley replaces a Bob Stoops, if that job is, if the Sooners go out and hire away a head coach that just, this carousel just spins. So that's what we've been talking about. Jedd Fisch, Kalen DeBoer, Nick Saban. But it sounds like if Harbaugh goes, that Moore will stay. And it sounds like Michigan would be – that's Michigan's plan. They're very – Michigan is – it's not a – we don't think of it as a tribal place, the way a clannish place, the way we do in the SEC.
South, yep.
The truth is, it's a pretty clannish place. I mean, anybody remember Bo Schembechler? When his basketball coach, he found out his basketball coach is going to Arizona State, and Bill Frieder, he just kicks him out in March. Said, a Michigan man is going to coach Michigan. And I think they like the idea of Michigan men, and I think Sherrone Moore is now a Michigan man, anybody associated with that national title. So I don't think Harbaugh is going to spin the cycle anymore. He does create an amazing opening. Think about it, Jacko.
Yeah.
We're looking at a Final Four from this past season in which only one of the four coaches potentially is back in his job.
Yeah.
And that's incredible turnover, incredible carouseling. And I think that's just the wave. I think that's just the way it is. Coaches are getting itchier and itchier. I don't know why, but it's easier to rebuild because of the carousel. I mean, because of the transfer portal. Yeah. So, all these methods of transportation, carousel, portal, I'm getting them all mixed up. But anyway, I think it's a strange time, no doubt about it. And Jim Harbaugh taking off for the NFL would definitely be part of that.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting to be, Michigan, their leadership right now, because I mean, this has been talked about for such a long time. Harbaugh to the NFL, Harbaugh to the NFL. you have to think there are head coaches out there or potential head coaches out there who have agents reaching out to Michigan people like nobody's business. Are you interested? Are you interested? Are you interested? Like who they're hearing from, because, I don't know. I tend to agree with you. I think if Harbaugh leaves, Moore is the guy, just because of the Michigan connections. But you're the AD, you're president, whatever at Michigan, and you're hearing from, who knows? I mean, I don't know what kind of names they're hearing from, but do you get sort of bright-eyed at the idea of whoever, that might be interested? You've got this, new look Big Ten. Is there any sort of, any sort of thought of, hey, we need to do different offensively. We need to really up the tempo if we're going to go against Washington and Oregon and all of those teams. Maybe we need to do something different that way. I don't know. I tend to think Sherrone Moore is going to be the guy if Harbaugh leaves, but it's just fascinating to think about all the inner workings that could potentially have already sort of been the conversations, well, we could get this guy. What about that guy? What about his philosophy? I think those are all interesting conversations that, somebody will surely get the details of at some point. But that to me is interesting. Do they get it all starry-eyed if somebody reaches out and said, hey, I'm interested? If Bill Belichick is suddenly interested in Michigan, does that change things? That doesn't set off the carousel again, but I'm curious to see, what are those people that are reaching out about that Michigan job potentially? All right, that's all the time we've got this week. Remember, you can find our columns, videos, and podcasts at selloutcrowd.com, as well as berrytramel.com and jenni-carlson.com. And if you want our content at your fingertips, and who wouldn't, we've got you covered. We have a new app. It's available for iPhone and Android, and you can download it today. If this happens to be your first time hearing or watching us, be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you like what you hear, please leave a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.